maybe if I were to start in at a high level about what is the so-called Colton principle, I would say that there's nothing magical about it. It is really more about understanding the fundamentals and where you're trying to go in any given problem. And so, at its simplest instantiation, the Colton principle is making sure that we know what problems we're trying to solve, that we do not bring in any unnecessary assumptions, and that we are able to reason through from a first principles basis everything that is essential to developing a design, a process, ultimately solving a problem. So that sounds fairly straightforward. You might say, okay, so why is that special? It's because often in organizations, the way problems get solved is by working through analogy. So one of the things that you'll hear often is about experience, right? So people, they see certain conditions, they see certain problem setups, and there seem to be a set number of plays or a few ways that it's supposed to be done that may have been successful in the past in other organizations, and those often tend to repeat themselves. But if you truly do break down a problem, you understand what the assumptions are, you make a point of not bringing in any unnecessary assumptions, really articulating exactly what the requirements are, being very precise, defining the boundaries of the problem, and then just reasoning through, it opens up a whole set of, frankly, creative options that seem to just naturally fall out of the way the problem is set up. And it can yield designs that are uncommonly creative, that can be very direct. They can often be very efficient. So a more practical way of achieving the intended outcome. And it helps us stay aligned and make sure that for any given project, we are always pointed to true north, so to speak. That we try to avoid getting off on these tangents, doing things just because that's the way it's supposed to be done, but instead we know at any point in time where we're oriented, where we're going, and why we need to go there. So where did the Colton principle come from? I will say many of the principles that we talk about are the fundamentals that you would see in most classic engineering organizations or problem solving. It is the problem statement. What do you know? What are your assumptions? Those sorts of things. In practice, as I described previously, a lot of those things tend to fall away in most organizations, and so it's more a deviation from a lot of what is told. Inspiration for me, when I look at who are historical figures that I think remarkable, they'd be conventional names that most people might have the same impression of their capabilities, but what stands out to me is how they were able to simplify and solve problems that eluded other people. So I tend to have a physics mindset in how we approach a lot of things, because what I see physicists as doing a particularly good job of is distilling down a problem to the essentials, figuring out what matters and what doesn't. And they're able to just continually refine and make sure they're throwing away the extraneous and only moving forward with what matters, to typically answering a very specific question. They formulate their question and then they figure out what is the path to get there. And so that is very much replicated in what we call the Colton principle. Even when you look at someone like Einstein, people know the name. They think he, many people would say, yeah, he's the smartest human being that's ever lived. They'll know E equals MC squared. But when you dig into what was it that was remarkable about him, and it was the fact that he asked the right questions and he knew how not to bring unnecessary assumptions into whatever problem was being solved. And so he's famous for a lot of things, but most people understand that relativity and the fact that time does not flow in a uniform way came from Einstein. And he was really the first person to assume that time was not a constant and just played around with the math to say, well, what would happen if time was not constant? How would that explain some of the experimental results that were being seen at the time? And when somebody in 8th grade math can understand the simplest derivation of time dilation as articulated by Einstein because of the way he set up the problems, how he thought about it, what he understood the requirements to be, him being diligent about not bringing in unnecessary assumptions, and then it just naturally fell out of it. Some of the equations and the thinking that is considered the epitome of human cognition when you actually trace it back through to the series of questions that were set up, were very straightforward and very simple. And so I think it was an Einstein quote that it's, getting the answers is easy. It's asking the right questions that matters. And a lot of what we try to do in setting up our designs is making sure we are asking the right questions so that we'll arrive at the right answers. Maybe another topic that I think orbits around some of what we've been talking about is the notion of experience versus capability. And this is sometimes something that gets discussed within organizations. People have experience doing something. And when we relate that back to some of the principles we've been talking about, experience matters because it means people have been exposed to certain conditions. And, if it's good experience, they will have learned how to navigate certain situations. They will have learned information, lessons, principles that they can be applied going forward. So experience is valued. But capability, and a lot of the things we've been talking about, relating to logical first principles decomposition of problems, can often arrive at similar results as somebody who is experienced if people are talented in deploying that. What does that mean for us at Maveneer? You'll notice that we're involved in a wide cross-section of industries. So not just manufacturing and distribution, but even within those segments, there is a broad array of types of organizations that we work with. And you'll find that many other of the design consultants and integrators that work in the space will tend to focus or prefer to focus on certain industry segments. And that's because that's where they can leverage experience. As they start to do those, they get better and better at them, and it becomes easier. We tend not to do that because we leverage first principles, and we feel that it actually makes us stronger overall. So these first principles allow us to go into a situation that we've never seen before. We can go into chemicals processing or cash counting, never mind e-com or omni-channel operations or the other things that are fairly commonplace. And by deploying these principles, we can go in and we can come across as if we have extensive experience, but it's because we are leveraging experience elsewhere and first principles application. And so that is one of the ways in which we're able to operate across a whole variety of industries. It keeps things fresh. We see a wide variety of problems. It also allows us to bring in top talent. We're not looking for people that have only worked in one particular industry. Really, we're sort of indifferent to what people's origin is, as long as they have the critical thinking skills and the desire to solve problems.